All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to week number 7. And we're going to be talking about pitch in music, high versus low. So, this is a really important concept to start to figure out here because in music, we have many different types of sounds that we are going to be listening for and creating ourselves. Sometimes we'll use descriptors like high or low to describe where the pitches on the staff are going to go to make sure we play the specific pitch that we want. Now, we do have the different letter names, but when we have those different letter names, we can repeat those letters. So sometimes we're going to have a high version of the letter, sometimes we're going to have a low version of the letter name. So let's dig in here and start figuring out how this whole high versus low thing is going to work. So to review first, the term pitch, like I've said before, kind of trying to hammer away into your heads right there, is the sound of each letter name on the staff and how high or low that sound is. And like it says right here, today we are going to focus on the second half of the definition, which is talking about high versus low. So the first thing that we're going to do here is we're actually going to take a look at some real sheet music for a trumpet part, and we're going to listen to this and see if we can kind of discover which sounds are higher and which sounds are lower. So as it says here, when thinking about high and low in relation to the staff, it's important to remember that the staff is a visual representation of pitches and rhythms. So what the staff is really doing is it is taking what you hear and making it something that you can see. It's very much like words. Words originated with being written down from the vocal oral tradition. So that means that originally stories were passed down from one person to the next and were all just spoken. We didn't start writing things down until much later. So music works the same way. It began by being performed and taught to people just by playing it back and forth and teaching them that way. Eventually, we wrote it down so that those things did not start to change. So it is a visual representation. That's important to kind of keep in mind that the staff is just a visual representation. So listening to these two pieces, the Leonora Overture from Ludwig van Beethoven, number 3 and number 2, excuse me, we can kind of start to hear where the pitches and rhythms line up. Even if you see some things in here right now that you don't necessarily recognize, that's okay. These things down here called triplets, we are not going to get into just yet. We've got some 16th notes and some ties and things of that nature. You can still start to hear, though, the important part of high versus low. So we're going to take a listen to this, and we're going to see kind of what goes on. Using my mouse here, I'm going to kind of show you where about we are in the measure, just so you can kind of keep up a little bit. Because for some of us, reading sheet music and listening to it at the same time might be a new skill. All right, so here is Philip Smith of the New York Philharmonic performing these two excerpts.
Beethoven's 2 Leonora calls are played from backstage. In each overture, the call is played twice, usually sounding closer and more urgent the second time. Use your imagination. You are sounding the call of rescue. Help is on the way.
So as you can hear, there are some sounds that are higher and some sounds that are lower. We're going to take a listen to this next one here, and we're going to get some even more different sounds in there. So hopefully you can start to hear where those notes are lining up, whether they're higher or lower or what have you. So here comes the second one, Leonore number 2. in music, listening is sometimes just as important as reading the music and things like that. So hopefully hearing those sounds and hopefully hearing what that looks like can start to help you discover what high and low is sort of going to sort of sound like on the staff right there. So we're going to continue on here. And a visual that I got for you here, the staff can be thought of as a ladder. So if you have a ladder, if you're at the bottom of the ladder, you're typically a little bit lower. If you are at the top of the ladder, you're a little bit higher. So that would be kind of one thing to keep in mind. The staff is very much like a ladder, and as you go from bottom to top, you are going to go from lower to higher pitches. So a very important note about high versus low. Pitches are high and low compared to one another. So this means that pitches at the bottom of the staff, if you've got two of them at the bottom of the staff, they can still be compared, and one can be judged to be higher or lower than the other. Now, are they both technically low notes? Yes, more or less. But if you have two notes, one that's down here and one that's up here, you can say that this one is lower, even though they're both relatively low. So that's something to be really kind of aware of, is there is no rule right here, like it says, that says all pitches at the bottom of the staff are low notes. They are lower, but they can still be higher than other notes that are at the bottom of the staff. So this is where it gets a little bit tricky. So we're going to dig into some examples here to kind of try to help you out with that a little bit more. So we got a flute part right here that I just wrote out, just some very basic stuff that shows you high and low notes. By scanning the measures, we can kind of see that there are some pitches toward the top of the staff. The treble clef is notes that are generally pitched higher. We'll go here first. So, thought we were going on. There are some pitches that are at the top of the staff, and some that are even above the staff, and some that are more towards the bottom of the staff and below the staff. The clef, like I said, tells us the overall sound of all of the notes that we're going to be listening to. So the treble clef generally says that those notes are pitched a little bit higher. So when we're thinking about those notes, we're thinking about, generally speaking, some higher sorts of sounds. So the pitches at the bottom of the staff, these right here, are kind of generally considered to be low pitches. They're outlined in that kind of pink color right there. So we do have some notes that fall into that category. The pitches that are at the top of the staff, kind of outlined in blue right there, are generally considered to be higher pitches. We can see that we have some in that category as well. Pitches in the middle of the staff are often compared to other ones. These guys right here towards the middle, kind of between those two boxes, can sometimes be higher, but other times they can be lower, depending on the pitch that they are being compared to. So by looking at this example, we can see that there are several higher or lower pitches just by those definitions that I just gave you, and just a few that fall in the middle. But like I keep saying, we can compare pitches to one another. So the general rule, to kind of recap here for a second, is that at the top of the staff, those are higher pitches. At the bottom of the staff, those are lower. Now, this does work most of the time, but we can compare them to one another, which is what we're about to do. So if we narrow the focus a little bit to just one measure, say, for example, we can illustrate higher and lower a little bit better. So in this example, using those strategies, remember we have every good boy does fine, and F-A-C-E as face in the space. We can see that we have a C, moving to a G, back to a C, and then up to an E. If we use the rules from the previous slides, we can see that C and G are in the middle, and E is a higher pitch. Now that works if we have a big long line, but if we're just looking at this, are C and G really both middle pitches? Not really, because they do get compared to one another. So moving on here, if we look at the pitches themselves, we tell a little bit of a different story. So by comparing the pitches in the measure to themselves, we can see that C is still considered a middle pitch because it's between those two other, the G and the E. However, G is going to become a lower pitch because it is below C. So comparatively, C is higher than that G. Even though it's technically a middle pitch, it is still a lower pitch on that G because it is below the C that we are looking at. E is still considered that higher pitch because it is above the other ones. So comparing those, we can see that now we have low, middle, and high. So this is a great way that we can kind of illustrate how comparing pitches to one another can kind of change those rules that we had about what's low and middle and high. So to summarize here, in week 6, we learned that the term pitch is the sound of each letter name on the staff and how low and high that sound is. Pitches at the bottom of the staff are generally speaking considered to be low. Pitches at the top of the staff are generally speaking considered to be higher. So the middle pitches are often compared to one another, which means that we sometimes have them acting as a higher pitch, sometimes they're acting as a lower pitch. So pitches can be compared to one another, but will not always follow those rules listed up above. All right, so the next thing that we have to do here, folks, is we're going to get a little bit of practice. We are going to take a look at comparing some of those pitches to one another. And we're going to get some practice on which ones are going to be considered high, which ones are going to be considered low, things of that nature. All right, so let's move on to our next part and keep working.